Hey everybody, thanks for coming to the garage. Today, we're gonna put these on. So these are Bmr Springs 1-inch drop. I got these from a forum member about a year and a half ago. So I've been kind of waiting to get them put on, and I'm at a spot in my build where I'm going to have to get a front end alignment because I moved the steering rack in order to get the oil pan off. So I'm going to need a front end alignment, so I might as well just put these on because I'm going to have to get an alignment when I do these. And yeah, a year and a half waits long enough. Well, let's get to work. Okay, so the tools I picked out, I'm not completely certain I'm going to need them all, and I may need some that I don't have here. But 24 millimeter, 21, 18, and 15 on deep sockets. I've got a 3/8 swivel head, 1/2 inch ratchet, 3/8 ratchet, a quarter with a 10 millimeter, and a quarter drive with an 8 millimeter. I'll show you. You may or may not need this, but I think you will. Just a small bladed screwdriver. 24 millimeter if they're ratcheting, even better. A 21, 18, 15, 10, and I got a 10 with the swivel head just because I like to have it around just in case. And of course an impact. And we won't be using this too much for assembly, but more for disassembly. And one of these might help, and I'll show you what I use that for. Well, I've looked at a few videos on how other guys do this, and there's one in particular that stands out. It's from Fast Tech. Now they actually have two videos. The hour-long one that is basically a live feed to Facebook. That one's very detailed, and I would recommend you watching that, and I can post that in the description on this video. One thing they don't say in their video is taking out the fender well. Might make things a little easier for you. They do have theirs out. They work on an SS. This is a ZL1, so there's going to be a couple things that are different, notably the magnetic ride and how to take that off. It's not difficult. I've seen some guys in the forum and they talk about having to depin the magnetic ride. Other than that, pretty straightforward. Okay, so we're on the left front. First thing I'm going to do is just pull the sensor grommet out. This one here for the brake line is going to be a 10 millimeter. Ratcheting box ends are really nice. Well, we're going to take out this nut, and the bolt will probably spin. This is the nut for the link for the sway bar, and it'll probably spin. So we're going to put that little quarter drive 8 millimeter on here. I believe that's one of the differences of the SS. In Fast Tech's video, he said he used a 7, but this is actually an 8, so maybe yours might be a 7. So we need to hold that while we loosen this, and this is tight all the way out because you can see, well, maybe you can't, but there is a triangle, 3 triangles on top. It's a crimp top locking nut, so the nut is not round inside, it's kind of oblong, and really they're only supposed to be used once. I know people in our shop that, you know, they'll reuse it a second time and use blue Loctite. So that is completely up to you. So we're going to take this out, and then we can get to this zip tie kind of thing that's holding the magnetic ride cable. And then right here, we're going to take that out and disconnect the magnetic ride shock from the harness. Then we'll take these 2 bolts out. And yeah, it should just fall right out. Well, we got the top to do yet. reason this 18mm is not going on here is because the harness and that tie wrap is not giving it enough room. As you can see the whole thing is rotating, and that's why you need the 8mm on there. So if you put that on there, this thing actually has to go the opposite direction of what you think it might. This is really tight with this camera here. Now we got it out. So we're just going to take that and set it to the side. Keep it out of the way. Now I can get to this a little easier. There we go. Yeah, it kind of munched it up, but that's alright. So we put the nut on that link just so we didn't lose it. And now we're going to go after this. And keep that thing back so you can see it. I'm going to use a pair of long needle nose. You could probably use whatever you want. All we have to do is squeeze those tabs together and kind of push it in there. There you go. And now it might be hard for you to see. I think somebody's been in here before where they forgot at the factory this great locking tab right there needs to be pulled up like that, and then you press down on it and pull the two away. There's the white tab. I'm going to press it and pull that off and just leave that off to the side. So now this stays with the strut. Okay, so I'm going to take these two nuts out off these bolts here, off the knuckle. Now, you could take a paint pen and run a paint pen around here. It tells you to do that in the service manual so you can get this back to where you had it before. So we'd already wiped off the majority of the dirt. Just kind of go around it. Oops, that made a mess. That's okay. Now the alignment shop is going to loosen these two up to adjust camber, and it does affect toe somewhat. So he's probably not going to use these since the camber is going to be affected when you use the lowering spring. But I'm doing this just to show you that you can index it. So you could use your 1/2 inch impact if you have one. If you don't, if you have an electric, that's great. These are loose enough that you can use hand tools on it. You can see it's really loose. But we're going to leave those in for now. We're going to come up to the top, take this cap off, set it aside, and loosen this up with the impact. So now that that's disconnected, as soon as we pull these two bolts out, the strut will be free. So we kind of want to support this from just flopping over because it's pretty heavy. We will rest it to the side, but we want to hold this too. I'm going to use my knee to kind of push in on that. Actually, I just realized we were actually supposed to do this before the one up on top. Makes it a lot easier. Well, that's okay. Since we're already there. Just let that fall away and bring the assembly out. So now that we have the assembly out, it really lets you see how dirty it is. Pretty grungy, at least for this car. Doesn't go out a whole lot. But we're going to take this nut off. Now normally on any other car you need a spring compressor. On the Gen 5, it's Gen 5 only, on the front and the rear you can disassemble these springs without the compressor. You could still use a compressor, I would recommend it, but since we're lowering the car, it's going to be easy to restart the nut and to compress a spring a little bit to get the nut back on. When it comes off, it's going to pop a little bit, but not bad. Any other car, it's dangerous. Get a spring compressor. It's a 24 millimeter, I think. Yep. We're just going to hold on to the back here. So you have the nut, and on this part you can see where the spring was butted up against there. We're going to put that back. That piece goes like that, not like that. Obviously you want the washer sitting against the bushing in there. OE spring. You notice there's no rubber or anything on it. I have no idea what the paint marks are. It was like that on the other side too. We'll set that aside. Now there's a rubber little tray in this boot. We're going to take the boot off. Doesn't seem to be leaking anywhere. And the little rubber tray is just held in with these. So how do I get this rubber piece out? If you pull this way, it's going to break it. These things, you just kind of push them in. See how it kind of fell out? They're not super hard to get in there. You just push them and twist. There it is. See, that's got a little shelf for the spring. That thing's really dirty. And this is really, really dirty. So I'm going to clean this up. And after I clean it, if there's any rust, I'm going to protect everything and sand it and primer and paint it. I had a little bit on the other side that I went ahead and painted. And then with the clean rubber piece, put it on there. Go ahead and clean these up. Just regular Dawn soap and water and a brush. And I'm just going to clean the whole thing. Try to keep this dry. Get rid of that ugly sticker that's all faded and almost gone. And scrub the rubber and also the boot and the top. And then put the new spring on and assemble it. One note, very important. When you're carrying this around, be sure not to nick the chrome rod. If you nick it and you reassemble it, especially if it's on the lower end, it'll leak. What'll happen is that nick will be drawn in and out past the dust seal and then the oil seal, and it'll just start leaking fluid. So very important. Any shock, for that matter, any cylinder, hydraulic cylinder of any type, these always have to be very clean and no nicks. So here's a rubber piece. If any of this is torn, just buy a new one. You'll find your part number right here. That should be it if it's not the engineering number. But yeah, if it's ripped at all, get a new one. This helps prevent the spring from squeaking on the seat. I've often heard people complain when they put lowering springs on a car that the springs squeak. I doubt if this is the reason. What I think it really is the bushings, when they loosen them to do their job, they loosen them with the wheel hanging, and then they tighten them that way. That's not the proper way to do it. You have to actually clock the bushings, which means having full weight on the car, and then tighten up the nuts and bolts that hold the bushings. Otherwise, you tighten them in the down position and then you raise them. It's putting torsion on that bushing, making it want to squeak. Now, I'm not going to do that because this is going over to the alignment shop, and I did not take out any of the bushings on the lower control arm or any of the other places, so we should be good there. Now, these are the two springs. The smaller one is the rear. The larger one is the front. We're going to take this and go put it on. So once again, I'm in the service manual. This is volume 5 of 5 on page 16-36, front suspension. I just wanted to point out the torque specs here. So this is how they are tightening using the Torx bit, which I believe is a T50. And then they're using a special tool to be able to go down inside. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that because I don't have that tool. So I may just tighten it by hand. But anyway, it's supposed to be 52 foot-pounds, 70 nanometers. And these bolts, so these should be new bolts. These are torque to yield. First pass 59 foot-pounds. Final pass 180 degrees. And these are locking nuts. So if you're going to have your alignment guy do this, you might want to hand him the new bolts and nuts. I don't know of very many alignment people that will actually do this. They'll probably just tighten it with an impact, which, well, probably be fine, but it's not the right way to do it. This nut here is 52 foot-pounds, and we're going to be doing that nut last because we're going to put the weight of the car on it. See, they're also using that tool. 70 nanometers, 52 foot-pounds, using that special tool. So everything seems to be dry. Paint's dry. Here's our little lip where our spring would be. Just move this around to be right there. So those are back in. We need to put the dust boot back on. Of course, I already inspected this and made sure there wasn't any dirt or anything on it. Put that on there. And, same thing for this one. You can see where the spring was sitting on there. We're going to do the same thing. You can see how the spring's sitting up there. It'll actually, it's like a little bearing or something. Now, because this spring is a little shorter, I'm going to be able to put this on myself just by pressing on it. It is a little bit tricky. I need some articulation, so I had to take off my glove. I'm just going to line that up. Okay. Double check everything. That looks good. That looks good. Now, you don't really want to run an impact on it. You're not really supposed to. You're supposed to use the tool like I showed you in the book. If you have a claw foot, you might be able to do that. Now you can buzz it down a little bit with this, which I'm going to do, but when it gets close, I'm definitely not going to want to sit there and hammer on it. Possible the threads will strip in the nut, or I've heard that you can bust the end of the shaft off, which I imagine is possible. Okay. I got it the majority of the way down. That is pretty tight. Is it 52 or 59 foot-pounds? I don't know, but it's tight. As tight as I'm gonna move it. I ain't gonna go anywhere. So in reverse order of the way I should have disassembled it, I'm gonna go ahead and bring the shock up here, and then put the cap on with the nut and get it cinched up, and then I can go ahead and place those two bolts at the bottom. So we got the strut up there, it's just loose hanging from the nut. We're going to bring the knuckle forward. Make sure that this link is inside of your ABS sensor, otherwise you'll be taking the sensor out to get it around. I'm using a jack just to help to support the weight of all this. This makes life a little easier for me. Now you guys might have noticed that the bolts are going the opposite way. Normally they go in this way. I'm running them this way. Now hopefully they're easier for the alignment guy, because I have more room over here. Okay, I'm gonna put the nuts on. Now I will be replacing these bolts. These are the torque to yield that I told you about. I'm going to go ahead and let the alignment technician do all his stuff that he's going to do. And then I'm going to come home, and one at a time, I'm going to take it out, put it in, torque it, what was it, 57 foot-pounds, and yield it 180 degrees. And then I'll go on to the next one. So at least these two will be correct. Well, that's a little loose. Let's go ahead and put the sway bar link in. Get that nut on. So now we can go ahead and plug in the magnetic ride so we don't forget it. Actually, let's hold off on that. Let's wait till we have all the other pieces done. Well, I didn't show you all the boring details, but I used the box end and the T50 with the ratchet just to bring that up so where I felt it stop. We're going to torque it once we get weight down on it. Now we can tighten these up. So you see the paint marks. You can bring it in like that. I'm going to do that with my knee while I hammer on it. I know you probably only see my arm when I do this, but okay, so now we're back to the 8mm. Where'd you go? There you are. The 8mm and the 18. These were 24. As you can see, it's turning. So that is tight. I will put a torque wrench on it, but I have a feeling that thing's going to spin anyway, no matter what the torque is. So, but that just holds the sway bar link. So don't forget about this gray lock, that once you push this into the connector, to go ahead and push that lock in. Okay, so the sensor's plugged in. The gray lock is away from you. And then we're just going to push in that little Christmas tree back into that hole there. So yeah, it doesn't look the greatest. But will it hold? Yeah, it holds it. Can't pull it out. You always get new ones. Now we're going to put the brake line back on. Slip it underneath there. And the bolt from the back side. I'm sorry, that's the wrong way. This way. I'm about ready to burn out my battery. This one right here. ABS sensor. This goes right into that groove. Like so. So these two bolts are tight. This link is tight. And I'm going to tighten this right now. We're done. Other than putting the wheels on, the wheel wells. So you can put some wheels on it, put on the ground, tighten up above on each one of the towers to spec, because it shouldn't spin with weight on it. At least that's what I hear. I'll put a little paint mark on there and make sure. So 59 foot-pounds plus 180 degrees is the spec on these two. So the top is 52 foot-pounds. And like I said, I'm going to tighten that once the thing's on the ground, which is going to be on the ground this morning, because I'm going to start the rears. There it is. Nut strut, 52 foot-pounds, 70 nanometers. So he shouldn't be taking that off, so we're going to go ahead and torque that. I put the torque wrench on this now that the car is back on its wheels, and if you can see it there, I put a little white mark. It was directly in, going straight back, and it did turn a little bit once I hit 52 foot-pounds with the torque wrench. So I might want to snug it up a little bit more with the ratchet. But I think this is going to be pretty good. See, this one's got the paint mark on it. move at all. So we're good. We'll give it another snugging after we drive the car around a little bit. Well, we've done the front, and I kind of like the way it sits now. It's a little bit higher in the back by an inch. So from the concrete to the top of the fender, it's 28 3/8, both sides. The back is 29 5/16, so it's a little bit smaller. Not quite an inch higher in the back. So if I put these springs in the back, it might make the back look like it's squatting. These springs, like I said, they were owned by another guy. I'm pretty sure they're broken in. So this isn't going to settle a whole lot. Something you guys want to know. I have the blue tint cone seats, so I'm going to 122 pounds to tighten my wheels on. If yours are silver, you go to 140. I don't know which car has the silver ones. Maybe the Z28. But you'll see the blue on the studs.